Thank you so much for your introductory remarks. And many of you are aware of TERI, but maybe I'll introduce ourselves for a couple of minutes. It's a not-for-profit research organization, and it's a think tank which works at the global level. So in TERI, we are talking, or rather, if I want to define TERI in two words, I'll say sustainable development. So we really look into the impact of climate change and sustainable development goals and sustainability as a whole. It's about 50-year-old organization, and it's a not-for-profit, and that essentially means we try to create public goods as much as possible. And it is a very well-respected think tank, and that is how we do get projects or center of excellence from various government departments. Now, the most recent one, and as rightly mentioned, we have established the National Center of Excellence for Green Shipping and Ports. So I'll just talk about a bit of work that has been done in the decarbonization sector and what India is aiming at. It's always difficult to be the last speaker because most of what I wanted to say has already been said. So if I can have the first slide. It is that we are talking that it's the shipping sector. In years to come also, it is going to grow. And what our problem, or rather it is that we are dealing with the shipping. It is not in one water. There are boundaries, but at the same time, the ships from different parts of the world, they will cross different continents. They will cross different seas. And whatever the emissions are going to have impact even on flora and fauna of the seas, as well as the immediate impact on the environment of whichever countries they go. We are also talking about that the share of shipping in years to come perhaps is going to go up. And more so in countries like India, even today, we are dependent lots on export, import, which happens through ships than any other mode of transportation. Next one. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at the Indian shipping industry, the cargo traffic at major ports, that is also in a way going up, and we are looking at that around 90% of India's trading by volume and 70% by value is done through maritime transport. Why this is extremely important is that we are talking of the regulations which are to be implemented, say by European Union and others. They are going to have direct impact on India's trade or maritime as a whole. And that is one of the reasons that Government of India started with Sagar Mala. Sagar in our language in Hindi means sea, and Mala is a string. So what we are in as a country, we are looking at the 12 major ports and almost 200 plus minor intermediate ports, that all of them should be developed in a particular way. We are very sensitive that maritime regulations internationally are very crucial, the way they are developed, and whether as a country we will be able to abide, and therefore we have to take precautions. We have to grow the way the international regulations are. It's in terms of maritime country, we are 16th largest with a coastline of over 5,116 kilometers, which is quite large. And the capacity or the trade which is done is quite appreciable. And we are not just looking at how it is, we are also looking at that it should be sustainable. Next one. Next slide, please. Now, the government of India is very sensitive that in years to come, we decarbonize India's shipping sector. As I have mentioned, first of all, we have a long coastline. It is also that the ships going to different countries, they also have either a halt or at least they go through the Indian maritime or Indian Sea. And therefore, we need to have regulations to safeguard our own interests as much as abiding to the international regulation. At present, it's about 99% of the total energy demand is met by the fossil fuel, with fuel oil and marine gas oil. So, therefore, there is enormous scope for decarbonizing the moment we move away from the fossil fuel to other renewable sources of energy. We are looking at if, of course, there are not so much of GHG emissions that we have recorded, but then the estimates are that the buyers may take GHG emissions to anywhere between 50 to 250% by 2050 in comparison to 2008 emission levels. So the levels are expected to go up if we don't check this particular sector. And therefore, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways has set target to reduce GHG emission to 30% by 2030. Of course, this is in accordance with the country's commitment in terms of use of renewable energy. And if we are looking at sustainable blue economy also, the green shipping sector becomes extremely important. Next one. Next, yeah. Now, what one is looking at, because see, if you know India, we are really, really diverse in terms of the climate. We are diverse, when I say we are diverse in terms of socio-economic conditions, acceptance of the technology development, and so on. So there are many countries in one country, you can say that sort of scenario. Why it becomes important? Because in many areas, we have plenty of sunshine and therefore solar becomes an option. In some areas, we have wind as more prevalent. In some areas, there is a lot of biomass available and therefore which can be converted into biofuel and so on. And when we are looking at green shipping, it is not just what kind of fuel should be used. We are looking at like biofuels. Can they be blended with the existing fuels? You don't change the design at all. We are also looking at other parameters because see what happens if the ship keeps on waiting for quite a while. There are lots and lots of GHG emissions. So how do we ensure that the ships, they just don't have to wait once they are on the shore? Sorry, they are on the shore. We take no time in loading or uploading of the ship. The infrastructure at the port should be as green as possible. And by that I mean it's not just their energy demands, but for on-land transportation as well. You ensure that those are CNG kind of trucks or hydrogen trucks, which are then taking the cargo to other places. The renewable energy, as I mentioned, it becomes extremely important. And whether we are looking at hydrogen production, then also the production of hydrogen has to be green. You really don't want to mess up by creating energy for any other use through the non-renewable or through fossil fuels. Green fuel bunkering is important. Transition to fuel cell technology for long-haul ships. And then most important is whatever you do, it should be acceptable and it should be who is going to put the bill. Is it that we are saying that the consumer, whatever it is, it should be passed on to the consumer. Those who are sending the freight or buying the imported goods, or it should be the government's responsibility. One is also looking at how expensive this transition will be, and so that a good planning can be done in terms of supporting this initiative. It shouldn't be that technology exists, but it's not affordable, it is not scalable. So one must look into all these aspects as well, keeping in view what is happening at the international level. So IMO rules, regulations becomes extremely important. And over there, we also want to ensure that as a country, or the voices of countries like India are heard, because there might be few things which are not acceptable, where the technology doesn't exist, the technology is very expensive, then one will have to suggest or buy time till one is able to make those changes, whether it is in the design of the ship, whether it is in terms of creating infrastructure, whether it is meeting the finances to create that green infrastructure. So therefore, the idea of national center, or what one is looking at, is that the regulations which are formulated, they should be not that one is saying that you have penalty of this kind. You are saying that we will follow the regulations, and this will be the roadmap. How many years will be required? What are the things which are required? Whether one is looking for technological support or financial support, because in years to come, our objective is to go green as much as possible. Next one. Next. And we have also done a sort of what kind of alternative fuels are available, what is the readiness of those technologies, whether they can be applicable to the shipping industry, and what are the advantages and disadvantages. When you look at all these, you will find that, yes, every technology, of course, there are different stages of development. If we look at green hydrogen, green ammonia, the applicability in terms of shipping appears to be very high. But in terms of technology maturity, we have to go a long way. Biofuels, in terms of technology maturity, it's quite a mature technology. But then if we look at how applicable it will be to the shipping industry, it falls in the low category. So this is basically, this particular slide is to give you an idea, where do we require more of technological interventions? But then one point I like to make is that those technologies where the maturity level has not been reached as yet have enormous potential. And by doing LC analysis, one can identify where to put in your efforts so that the technology becomes economically viable. The other thing is that economy of scales play a very important role. Now, mostly the problem becomes that in many cases, we leave the technology that it is very expensive, or because of few errors, but there are not many mechanisms to test them at the pilot scale, and also their acceptability in the international arena. So one may not have, and I always believe that one shoe doesn't fit all. So therefore, while we are looking for opportunities, perhaps there will be differences in nations, there will be differences across continents of what proves to be best suited for their conditions. And therefore, we are at a stage that we really have to work and look into the technological options and move towards it. Next one. Now, we just try to develop a potential roadmap, because whatever the technology is, there is scale up required, which will be on customer demand. We need to have global regulatory alignment. which is extremely important, as I said, because ship will go from one country to the other, and it will be in the water which belongs to different continents or countries. There's need to develop cross-sector research and development, because when you're looking at biofuels, you also have to look into the availability of biomass. If you're looking at green hydrogen production, you also look into the availability of water or desalinization of water for electrolysis purposes, and whatever energy you require has to be created by renewables. So whether you will really have that kind of land mass and fresh water available to carry out those activities. So the research becomes very cross-sectoral. The other point, which is very, very important, is that it is very different to produce few kg of hydrogen versus the kind of requirement of hydrogen exists. So therefore, scaling up of controlled pilot projects becomes important. And over here, I'll also like to say that the technology, it should be safe. And somewhere over there, one is also talking about that you need skill development at various stages. Some of the new technologies, they are little more risky than what we are doing conventionally. And when I say risky, it is largely because we still have not perfected the technology. We don't have trained manpower, because otherwise there is no technology which is risk-free. So what we need to do is that we have to create trained manpower at various levels. For example, if you take case of hydrogen, perhaps you require skill development at the level of the person who is going to dispense it in your car. So it is at the various stages of the entire chain that you have to have trained manpower. We also have to ensure that industry commitments, they are coordinated. We need to have modular designs, port collisions, investors, a sort of pressure, green finance, scaling up of fuel production, bunkering infrastructure, and most importantly, operational efficiencies. And that holds true perhaps for every kind of energy project, but it is extremely important that in this sector also we look into that nothing gets wasted, because even if you waste few units of energy, it is far more expensive than creating energy. Next one. Next slide, please. So looking into it, Government of India and with TERI, we signed an MOU in November last year, and we have set up National Center of Excellence. And it is multi-partner and multi-funder kind of an initiative. So what we are looking at, that we develop state-of-the-art technologies and application products, along with different countries of the world as well. We don't want to reinvent a broken wheel, but what we are looking at, if technologies exist elsewhere, and one of the best example is that Denmark has come forward, and they have a person sitting in the Danish embassy who will be helping us with the technologies for green shipping. We are in discussion with Norway and few other countries. Then TERI can't do everything, and therefore we also have research partners who will be helping us with various pearls of the string that we want to construct over a period of time by researching on different aspects of what is required. And we are looking at innovations as well. It is not just what has been invented elsewhere. So we are looking at innovations and creating pool of competent manpower to the for the industry, which is equipped with both theoretical and practical knowledge. Next one. So the thrust areas are policy, regulation and research, human resource development, As I mentioned, we are looking for strategic collaborators, explore area of work, outcome, projects, and resources, and engage with dissemination of whatever we do. The partners, we have partner institutions which are supported by the ports as well as Cochin Shipyard Limited. So they all are working with us, or rather we are collaborating partners. So what we are also looking at, that we will look into various problems through the scientific research in the field of energy management, emission management, renewable energy and green hydrogen, and sustainable maritime operations. Next one. And hydrogen, there is enormous potential, and one is looking, or rather we are looking at hydrogen as the fuel for the future. Next one. And of course, the electrolysis is the most favored method at the moment, but we are also looking at other methods apart from electrolysis of water, and those are thermal cracking of natural gas, steam reforming, partial oxidation, and so on. Next one. And another thing is that in TERI, we have a very strong group working with microbes, and therefore we are looking at biological route. And it is largely that there is so much of waste biomass that is available in all the countries, and that is again something biomass can be created. It is more of fixation of carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, and more is the hydrogen or CO2 fixed by this process. Or if the glucose level in the biomass is on the higher side, you get more of hydrogen production. We have identified microbes both for anaerobic, aerobic digestion and fermentation process. And we do have, of course, I'll put it this way, it's in research. Levels are not satisfactory and we have to go a long way. But I always believe that there are different stages of research, and first is proof of concept, it can be done. And then you, through LC analysis, you start looking into where to invest your energies in research so that you can reduce the cost of the process. So we are at TRL 3 and 4, depending on various technologies that are available with us. Next one. So by using organic waste, we have produced hydrogen. Next one. And through different microbes, and we have done in the pilot scale up to 1500 liter for bioreactor. Next one. Same, it is agriculture residue, and some of you might be aware that in parts of India, we burn the agriculture residue, which further adds to the pollution. But through this technology, we are looking at if agriculture residue can be converted into hydrogen, and which is feasible. But as I said, it is economically not viable as yet. So by increasing efficiency of the microbe, by reducing capex, perhaps we will be in the situation. And even today, if we take into consideration the health effects, then even today it may become a viable technology. Next one. So with this, I'd like to end. And basically, it is that we really have to look into renewables. We have to look into biomass. And the only way to survive is that the shipping sector, which again moves right from, which extends from the construction of the ship to dismantling of the ship, we have to look into each of the processes and make them as green as possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Vibha. Thank you very much. This was very grateful to hear how TERI is engaging, and how is TERI also supporting the, I have to get this mouthful, the National Center of Excellence on Green Ports and Shipping. And I appreciate your holistic view of really to look at the entire chain. I'm just now trying to see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I always have a question. I think the question is, how far is, so the National Mission on Hydrogen has also suggested 3 ports to be selected for specific hubs. How far is TERI involved in these hubs, and how will these ports play a role in decarbonization of shipping?
Yeah, in terms of hydrogen, TERI is largely doing the policy kind of work at the moment. But the ports on their own, they are in discussion with various countries, and by taking the technology from them for testing utilization of hydrogen in the ships. And they are also getting into agreement for production of hydrogen near the ports itself. But those are technologies which are not indigenously developed. Rather, those are the technologies which we are in the process of testing, which have been developed in other parts of the world.
Okay, thank you. I see that Dr. Prasad has now switched on his video, an indication he may want to add something himself.
So as I said, we are supporting 2 hydrogen hubs initially, and even these hubs are likely to come up near ports. That hubs, the hubs would involve, I mean, the mission says that it would involve probably production. It may also involve ship refueling stations, storage facilities, and so on. This is what and those will be decided based upon the industry feedback, where their plants are likely to come up.
Okay, that's where it is. So it's really where, which makes sense. I mean, you want to have the hubs there where you have also industries, so that there's actually value added, and that you don't want it in a small fishing hub. That makes sense. So thank you for adding that. And it's great to see that there's actually alignment, and that the ports play a major role really in the decarb, and also in the hydrogen strategy.